Hello, good evening. Welcome back to the Tunnel Podcast, episode 50 of the great podcast in the world. Delighted to say, look, it's quite fitting actually that we're back talking about international stuff because that's how we kicked off this podcast way back in the summer before Euro 2024. The star-studded lineup is back. As always, I'm joined by Tom Goff. Tom, how are we doing?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks.
Was that a meeting of Thomas Tuchel covering the mouth, sending a message? Was it there? What was that?
No, it's the wife. She's doing a bit of late night DIY, and all I can hear is blooming her hammering away. I think she's putting some pictures up in my little girl's room. I did say I'm going on at 7, but all I can hear is her banging away upstairs. So I was just giving her a very polite request to pack the banging in, please.
Brilliant. And listen, look, familiar face. Connor Chalmers is back with us. Connor, thanks for coming along, mate, and talking all things Scotland. How are you doing?
Aye, grand, mate, absolutely. Delighted to be back. The band is back together, eh? That's the positive thing about these international breaks, gives us the opportunity to get back together. I've, of course, have tuned in and taken part where I can in the comments with some of the shows. Obviously, you guys doing a tremendous job with the EFL, which, to be fair, some interesting stories going on in the Championship this season, so you've had plenty to get your teeth sunk into. But I'm delighted to be back talking about international football, and of course, Scotland win, so that's always nice to come on and talk about. And to be fair, after this past week, you'd be hard pushed to get the smile off my face, I can tell you.
Well, listen, England start their World Cup qualifying tonight, match day 1 against Albania. The team lines are out. We will come on to that momentarily, but we have got to start last night, Connor, in Athens. You know, the city of ruins and Scotland do not crumble. It's a 1-0 victory for Steve Clarke. Can I talk us through that? And you know, I don't want to kind of be stereotypical, but it was kind of the game of two halves, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so. I mean, look, most important thing is obviously the result. You know, you take something back to Hampden on Sunday where you fancy is, to be able to get the job done. First time Scotland have won an away game against a side ranked above them since James McFadden's goal in the Parc de France. 2006, that was a lot. I was still in primary school actually at the time, so that's how long ago that was. Listen, it was one of those ones where we certainly rode our luck at times, particularly in the second half, you have to say. Greece had some really, really good chances. There was one particularly I came in at the back post, and how he hit the post and didn't score, I'll never know. Obviously, late on, thought that Grant Hanley had done Poland all over again and sold the jerseys with a late penalty. I was absolutely graffing up, but thankfully it was just outside the box, so he got very lucky there. But I think overall, I think we done enough to say that we come out of there with a deserved result. You make your own work sometimes, and I felt we done that, particularly the first half performance. You know, people can look at the second half and go, but all the chances they had, the chances we had in the first half, though, we could have been 2-3 up at the break. Should have at least been 2 up, because Shea Adams has a couple of big moments. Keeper, sells the jerseys and passes it out. He's probably got to do better and score. We get the penalty. I don't know your thoughts on it, Robert, but there's been a lot of debate around whether it was or wasn't a penalty. I'm of the opinion that it's one of those decisions that, and I hate saying it because I don't like when this excuse gets made, but I think whatever decision the referee made there was never going to get overturned by VAR. I think it's that type of call. If he doesn't give it, then VAR won't intervene and tell him to award it. But equally, I think if he's saying to VAR, look, I've seen contact between defender and attacker, I'm not sure that VAR have enough there to say it's a clear and obvious error. So we do get the benefit of it, but I just think it is one of those marginal ones that, let's be honest, hasn't always went Scotland's way in the past. So we'll absolutely take it. And of course, McSauce steps up, slots it away, repping the old Italian tan these days as well. So happy days. And listen, it's half time. And the fixture overall, still loads of work to be done. I think there's improvements as well that we can make. But overall, absolutely delighted with the result.
Just on the penalty, look, we should have had one against Hungary at the Euros that probably saw us through. So these things are meant to balance up. So we'll take it and we'll move on. Tom,
that was a stone waller as well, that one.
The one against Armstrong, yeah, exactly. It's just, I just think these things kind of level themselves up. Tom, Steve Clarke could have gone back to a back three, back five, what you want to call it. Could have tried to get Kieran Tierney back in. He didn't do that. He kind of went with his tried and trusted. You look at Grant Hanley, who I know you've got a soft spot for, and Tony Ralston as well, who've put, I think Tony Ralston's actually played more games for Scotland this season than he has for his own club. But it seems to be that Steve Clarke, goes with players that he can trust. He's almost like trying to build maybe a kind of club mentality at a national level.
Yeah, you're right. Probably on paper, there's some better players out there that are perhaps starting some of these games. For Scotland, like you said, you've just kind of highlighted Hanley and Ralston, who, the pair of them aren't playing much football domestically, are they? But they keep getting a nod for Scotland. But yeah, like you said, Scotland were on they were building a little bit of momentum, weren't they, towards the end of the the group stages in the what's it called? I always forget what it's
the Nations League.
The Nations League, yes. They were building a bit of momentum. And these guys were part of that. So yeah, you guys obviously give your opinion more than me, but I can understand why he's keeping these guys in the team. Like you said, he does very much seem to have his I don't want to say favourites, but yeah, it's the guys he trusts probably more than anything, isn't he? And he shows a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in those guys, regardless of how they're performing domestically. So yeah, it's I think I obviously have a bit of banter with you guys, especially yourself, Rob, about the fact some of these guys, they're not even getting first team starts for their domestic clubs in the Championship, etc. But they're doing the business for you guys, aren't they? I thought look, I didn't watch the game. I didn't watch the full game last night. Today I've caught up with extended highlights. And again, like you said, the second half, it very much was kind of back to walls, wasn't it, for you guys? But, defensively, it seemed like a real kind of resolute, determined performance. They were playing for the shirt, a lot of last-minute blocks and interceptions and, trying to get their head on the end of absolutely everything, putting their bodies on the line. And, I think Hanley, other than like Connor pointed out, the foul right at the very end, which was very close to being a penalty. I thought the two guys, and like I said, from everything I've read in the reviews as well, performed really well in that defensive back line. So you've got to kind of credit Steve Clarke, haven't you? I guess, for sticking with these guys and not conforming with a lot of the noise outside, saying, "Well, why aren't you playing this guy? Why aren't you playing that guy?" They're playing more for their domestic clubs. They're arguably better players in terms of quality. He's kind of proven them wrong, stuck with those guys, and they put in a performance.
Connor, would you just on that in terms of selection? I don't want to dwell too much on Kieran Tierney, but let's talk Lewis Ferguson. Let's talk, the boys that are playing in Serie A, and obviously then you've got the captain of a side in the last day of the Champions League. It's a far cry from, maybe 10 years ago where we were kind of scraping around and looking at Nigel Quasi's and, trying to get anyone to claim some sort of affiliation to Scotland to get them in. There's a real quality there. And we speak about, being 1-0 up and it's only half time, but the Greeks didn't show to me that we should be fearing them come Sunday night, 5 o'clock at Hampden.
No, look, the Greek are a decent side. There's no getting away from it. And they can get themselves up for games. I mean, we've seen when they played England after, was it George Oakley, and the situation there.
George Baldock.
Sorry,
yeah.
Oakley, Baldock. They got themselves well up for that because the emotion led them through that. And of course, England were playing some absurd formation at the time as well, which helps matters. But they played well there, and they played well through their group to get into the position they're in to try and get promotion. So you knew going into yesterday, this could be a tough game. But coming out the back of that, you're now thinking, well, there's no reason why, as you say, we should be fearing this challenge coming up at Hampden. We have taken on and beaten better sides in recent times at Hampden. And if we go in and put in the type of performance we're capable of, like what we've done against Croatia or what we've done against Portugal or Spain, then we'll be absolutely fine and dandy. But the players will need to step up. I do think that we can't allow it to swing the way it did in the second half yesterday, in terms of you can't be backs to the wall constantly and just facing, wave after wave of attack, balls in the box all day long and just chance after chance, because one of them will be taken. And very nearly was yesterday, as I said, that one hits the post. There's one that is ruled out rightly because it's about 4 yards out of play by the time it's crossed back in. But those are the fine margins that you'll not get all the time if you keep doing that. So we need to be more positive, more in the front foot, and expect us to, because at Hampden that's usually what we do. And if you can go out, get an early goal, kind of puts it to bed then, because you're not liable to go and concede 3. So I think I'm more than confident that we'll get the job done and we'll stay dining at the top table of the Nations League for a while yet, which is advantageous to us because we've said it before on here, and particularly during the Euros, the more exposure Scotland get to playing against these top sides, the better it prepares us for tournaments going forward if we're to qualify for the World Cup and even the subsequent Euros after that. You want to play these teams before then so that you go in with a better idea of what you're going to face.
Tom, is that something you would subscribe to as well? That's I've heard kind of both sides of this argument this week. Some say, we're better off being relegated into League B. Do you think the top tier is where it needs to be at? If you're going to progress and you're going to move forward as a nation?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think. This is why when we were doing the pods and we were discussing. Your group games in the last, in the Nations League last time round, obviously you got off to a tricky start, but you were in those games, there was things to be positive about, within those matches. You weren't getting, absolutely tanked in those games. You were holding your own at times. You were creating chances, but, like Connor's just been saying, things weren't maybe necessarily, falling for you. There was a couple of mistakes which were, at this level, they're going to be taken advantage of. But there were signs of progress there. And then towards the end of, those Nation League fixtures, you started getting the results, and it comes from exactly like what Connor's saying. You're playing the better teams in Europe. You're testing yourself against the best. You're getting that experience. That first set of fixtures, like you're saying, the fine margins. You know what it takes to get something from these games, and it showed towards the end of it that you were adapting. You were getting better at tackling. That caliber of team. And look, the game. Yes, look. Like you said, Greek. I was, like I said, catching up with some stuff today, and I was watching the highlights, and it was quite interesting because Stephen Naismith after the game was saying that Greece have only lost something like 3 times at home in 25 games, I think it was, something something really impressive like that. So that was good going last night, going and getting that win. Really tricky place to go and get the win. And look, it was very much a game of two halves for me from what I've seen and what I've read. You were well deserved the lead at half time, and all right, you rode your luck at times in the second half, but on the balance of real clear cut chances, I felt it was quite an even tie. So I think obviously the result yesterday, parts of that performance are some real positives to take there. But I think you're absolutely spot on. I think you want to be playing the very best. I think that's the only way you're gonna progress as a nation. And I think you just touched on the Italian guy, the guys playing Italy, Rob. I think there's more Scotland players are kind of branching out a little bit into the top leagues across Europe, and I think I think it's a real positive, and I think these guys have got the ability to perform against the very best. So I think if you were to even ask those guys themselves, I'm sure they would all come out and say, look, we'd much rather be taking on the best Europe has to offer than like you said, playing lesser teams, so to speak, where you might have more chance of getting a win and scoring more goals and so on, but it's not going to do anything for your progression. And if you've got real aspirations of going to a tournament and just not just making up the numbers, actually doing something, getting through to the knockout stages, and you've got to be, you've got to have that desire to be taking these teams on.
Connor, some huge landmarks yesterday, actually. I think Grant Hanley picked up his 60th cap, Craig Gordon 80, but Captain Robbo 81. He becomes the third most capped player for Scotland. I think he overtook Darren Fletcher. He's just in behind Jim Leighton. Metaphorically speaking, not figuratively. He's already told Kenny Dalglish that he's coming for him. So again, metaphorically, not figuratively. So yes, you then add that in. Sorry if I can just compose myself with the likes of debuts for George Hurst and Max Johnson, who Tom just said there, another guy playing on the continent. Okay, it's in Austria, but he has played in the Champions League this season. He's won a couple of trophies in Austria already, and he's short tenure there. There's a nice blend going on in this squad at the moment.
There is very much so. That blend of experience and youth. You've got young lads like Lenny Miller, who didn't feature yesterday, but in amongst the squad. Probably see him on Sunday at some stage if the game is going the right way for us. But you need that. We've said before that when Steve Clarke first came in the first tournament we got to, the Euro 2020, 2021, there was a naivety about Scotland then because they were apart from one or two players, a relatively inexperienced side at that kind of level, and you were relying on guys like Andy Robertson, who'd obviously been in Champions League finals and won it and stuff like that to try and get you through games. Now there's not that over-reliance so much anymore. It spreads nicely across the park. And I think it's important that you have that. It's great as well that we've got guys like Lewis Ferguson in that back. Obviously he missed a fair chunk of international football and football in general with that bad injury that he had. So having him back is a breath of fresh air as well. Even if he was maybe slightly fortuitous not to give away a penalty himself. But I think, you touched on like Max Johnson as well. He comes on and gets a cameo really at the end, but gets a couple of minutes in the legs. We've seen Tommy Conway recently get his opportunity. So it is real positive signs. And you need that because we keep having the conversation, right, okay, well, what's the next generation of Scottish talent look like? Who's next up on the ballot? And you see guys that could be good enough for it. And you think, you can get guys like Luke McCowan and stuff like that as well. But these are good players who should be playing at international level. And if we can get them into the squad, then all the better. Because we've missed out on players that we should have called up, and then we just didn't, left it too late, or for one reason or another couldn't get. So it's good to see that wealth growing within the camp, and hopefully it continues. And I think on Andy Robertson, just very quickly, I think he will break Kenny Dalglish's record. When you think about it, the man's 31, he'll be 32 this year. He's only 22 caps away, and given the amount of international football that you play, you consider the next Nations League campaign and the World Cup qualifiers, probably breaks that by early 2027, probably at the latest, because it's only 21 caps. That doesn't feel like an awful lot in the grand scheme of things.
What do you think to Andy Robertson in a 4 compared to maybe a 3 or a 5? Is it maybe, I'm sort of, I do rate Kieran Tierney, and I know I'm a Rangers fan at heart, but I do rate Kieran Tierney. But I don't think he was a huge miss, if that makes sense. I don't think Andy Robertson lost anything from not being beside him. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think people have to remember at club level, he tends to be playing in a 4 anyway, more often than not, and he does it very, very well. I think it suits him. Look, Tierney obviously absolutely adds value to the squad, and you want him in where you can. He's had a lot of injury issues recently. He'll be back up north in the summer. Obviously, he's signed that pre-contract to come back up to Celtic, so that might get more regular first-team football as well, which will be useful for him because he needs that. And let's face it, he's not getting any younger either, so he needs that if he's going to keep maintaining a position. But no, I think Andy Robertson's done a very, very good job. You can't have any arguments with what he's doing in that position. I would say that without Tierney in the team, you worry about the depth in that position because really it is only Robertson and Tierney naturally that can play there. It's the same on the other side. Obviously, you've got Ralston in at the moment, but Hickey and Patterson were kind of exchanging that position between them at one point as well. So you need that competition, but Andy Robertson's, for me, yeah, he's just doing brilliantly right now. Maybe not had the best week for his club, but certainly for country, he's doing very well.
Tom, going into this game, Scotland had 7 players on a booking. Miraculously, none of those guys got booked, so they won't miss the game on Sunday. You know, I have to agree with what James McFadden said last night on CoComs, that they should be scrapped going into this playoff situation. You shouldn't be having them hanging over them. It's a kind of new phase of the competition. But how important is it that, you know, Steve Clarke can go again full strength come the weekend? I dare say the Greeks will probably make changes, because the ones they made last night from the bench made an impression, particularly the young 17-year-old. I think we'll all agree he's got a massive future in the game. He looked really impressive, brave, forward thinking, always trying to make something happen.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I think you'd be surprised, wouldn't you, if Clarke was to make, you know, any changes, because of, like you said, you know, first half display was fantastic. Like Connor said earlier on, you should have gone in leading by more than the 1 goal, to be honest. Yeah, second half, it was a bit back to the walls at times. You know, like you said, Greece, the changes that they made, kind of, it improved them drastically, didn't it? And like you said, that spearheaded by that 17-year-old. So yeah, expecting change. Greece. I don't know what you guys think, but considering the first half performance, how good defensive you were then in the second half, the fact that you got the win, I'd be surprised if he was to make any changes going into the game Sunday. And you'd probably have to say it'd be unfair, wouldn't it, to drop any of those guys that did start. And
I don't see Scotland dropping as deep as he did second half at home. I don't think the crowd would allow it.
The fans are going to be a factor, aren't they? And look, again, the second half, as soon as the Greeks started to get into the game and build some momentum, the crowd got really behind them, didn't they? It turned into a bit of a cauldron, and that then spurs them on, doesn't it? Whereas, the Scotland fans on Sunday, if they really get behind the players, then yeah, you're right. It's you should hopefully see a more positive performance. Well, not positive performance, but you know what I mean. Like you said, you're not sitting back, or if you do sit back, it's not for as long. You try and take the ball by the horns again and try and start attacking and being positive going forward. So, it's that. I think that again, the crowd's going to play a massive role, isn't it, on Sunday? If they, it's one of those cliches, isn't it? But when the Handon fans are right behind the team, then it is like another man, isn't it? You guys will be the first to admit, especially at difficult times, the crowd hasn't been there, and it's kind of had the real negative effect on the players, hasn't it? You can the moans and groans, etc., quite clear. But when the fans are behind them, which they have been of late because of those positive results towards the end of the Nations League group stages, like I said, they can be the 12th man, can't they? So, and they're going to be well up for it, aren't they? Taking that lead into the game, I'm sure it's going to be a cracking atmosphere. But yeah, going back to what you said, mate, I'd be astonished to, if he was to make any chances, because there doesn't seem to be any need, does there? And looking at the starting 11, I don't know what you guys think, but that's got to be as close to your strongest starting 11, hasn't it?
We don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury like the Greeks do of having an £18 million striker on the bench.
Yeah, well, I think you look at your midfield, and attack. Those guys, they're all starters, aren't they? Week in, week out. It's only maybe the defence really where there could possibly be changes, but they were absolutely fantastic in the game yesterday. So yeah, I can't see it happening, to be honest.
Connor, just final word to you on Scotland, and I don't want to be mean to anyone, but obviously George Hurst gets his first cap. As I said, I don't want to dismantle him already, but do you think Lawrence Shankland, Kevin Nisbet, even I know he's in the squad, could feel a little bit hard done by? I didn't see anything, even likes of Lyndon Dykes. Does he offer anything more than these guys?
Well, I think it's difficult, I think, to judge on yesterday because it's not like he had an awful lot of time. He had 15 minutes, and most of that time was spent with us defending. So he didn't have much to chase. Look, certainly, if I'm Kevin Nisbet and I'm sitting on the bench, I'm probably thinking, a bit disappointed not to go on. But then equally, has he done enough in recent times at Aberdeen to say that he should have come on ahead of Hurst? He started the season well enough at Aberdeen, but much like where their forms went, it dipped, and then he's had injuries, and then he's come back in. So, there's that. Shankland, obviously, I mean, he's the one that sticks out with a sore thumb, but he's not having the best of seasons. He's struggled a bit for one reason or t'other. So I think, I can totally see why George Hurst has been given the nod there, and it's good because we need more strikers coming in. I don't know what the issue is with Tommy Conway. Is he injured? Maybe you guys will know that better than me. But he'd be one. If I was him, I'd be feeling a bit hard done by, to be honest, if he's not injured or anything, because he should probably be in the squad. But you need that. Because think about it, Lyndon Dykes obviously injured. He was in the studio last night. I dare say if he had been in the end of the chance, Che Adams had got, I might have fancied him to score it. And I mean, Lyndon Dykes is a bit more of a powerhouse at the top. His hold-up play can be brilliant sometimes. It really can.
Especially if you are going to endure a second half like we did, he's more of a focal point to get you up the park.
That's exactly what you need. You need somebody who you can do that way and just alleviate the pressure a bit, allow the team to come forward and just, give the defence a breather for a couple of minutes. That's what Lyndon Dykes brings you. So certainly it's disappointing not to see him involved. But equally, I think the more young, hungry strikers we can bring through, the better. It gives you that option up there that you need. And I think certainly, hopefully George Hurst can do better, and as we see more of him in a navy blue jersey.
Okay, I'm kind of pushing for time because obviously England are kicking off shortly against Albania. We haven't even spoke about them. They start, as I say at the start of the pod, their World Cup qualifying campaign tonight at home to Albania. Tom, it's Thomas Tuchel's, baptism, if you want. I want to just kind of start with it, quickly run through the lineup. So we've got Pickford, Walker, Concert, Dan Burn gets his debut, Miles Lewis-Skelly also. You've got Declan Rice, Curtis Jones, Bellingham, Foden, Rashford back in, and Harry Kane. Just initial reaction to that one for me.
Look, I don't want to. I said to myself before we went on tonight, look, I'm going to try and not. I'm not going to be negative, man, because look, let's just put it this way: when the squad was announced, there was a few shocks in there for me. There was a few players that I felt feel very unfortunate not to have made the squad, and I think there's some in there that can feel very fortunate to have made the squad, and. And I think there's probably a lot of England fans that share the same opinion as me. But look, in the past, I think this is one of the problems. We've spoke about it many a time, haven't we? With England, that we are as a fan base, we are very quick to kind of start nagging and moaning and getting at the manager and starting the negativity off early doors. So I'm trying not to do that. Look, I think we've got to just see how it goes. I think this is his first squad, first game. All right, look, we're playing Albania, but I want to see how it plays out. To be honest with you, like I said, it's there's some surprises in there. There are for sure. I think the fact Marcus Rashford's been picked ahead of certain players, I think, is very questionable. But it's again, he has shown in the past that he has got quality. He can be a top player. So if Tuchel can kind of get that back out of him again, then it's a no-brainer, isn't it? He can be a world-class player on his day, but we haven't seen it for a very long time. And he's had half a dozen games or so for Aston Villa, whatever it is. Yes, there's been some positive signs in there, and he's put in some performances and got some assists, etc. But there's been guys who, performing in the Premier League, consistently all season, much better levels than Rashford has, who have missed out, which I do think is a bit unfair. But again, I think, there's got to be a bit of patience there from England fans in that Tuchel's obviously got a system, an approach, a way he likes to play. Some of these guys that have been left out might not necessarily, fit that system. And the guys that he's brought in, even though maybe they haven't, like we've been talking about Steve Clarke in Scotland and some of the guys, for you, he's brought those guys in because they fit his system and the way he wants to play. So, I think we've got to see a few games under him, haven't we, first, before we can really kind of deep dive and start kind of, analysing, critiquing if warranted, and so on.
Connor, he said in the build-up to this that, at the Euros, England looked like a team that they were scared of failure. He wanted to see them play more of an English style, quote-unquote. We're not going to play like Spain or Italy. Does that then kind of back maybe the inclusion of the likes of a Dan Burn? Does he encapsulate a kind of English style, Or what does even an English style look like? Because I remember us maybe sitting on a pod 4 or 5 months ago discussing copycat coaching from English managers, and we didn't really know what an English style looked like. Tell me maybe how Tuchel sees an English style.
Well, I mean, I think it depends. I mean, Tuchel's style is always a bit more of a pragmatic one, but with a bit of flair. I think England can be similar. I think your best England teams, usually the style tends to be you be a solid team at the back. You have big lads up there who can deal with things, and then you allow your midfield and your attack to be free-flowing, playing good football. That's what England have always done for many a year, as far as I can see. And I think, Dan Burn fits that mould, absolutely. He will throw his body about, no problem for you whatsoever. He loves that physical side of the game. One thing I think he will help with is set pieces. You want a big lad like him towering above people and being able to get his head onto things coming in the box, both sides of the box, by the way, because as his header on Sunday proved, he's capable at the other end as well. And you could maybe lay some criticism at England that they're not always clinical for set pieces and particularly corner kicks and things, so he'll help with that. I do think that this kind of game, the lineup he's chosen, is symptomatic to the side he's playing against. I don't think he envisages much of a challenge out of Albania, which might be an oversight because Albania are not a bad side. There's some decent players in their ranks who can cause problems. I worry about a young lad like Miles Lewis-Skelly getting the start so early on, just purely because, he's done well at Arsenal, but he's also had that little bit of rashness in him of his youth. Like his first red card he got for Arsenal was harsh, but his second one was a stonewall red card that he couldn't complain about, and it just showed that naivety of him. And throwing him in, it's like, well, okay, baptism of fire, but is it the right call? I also think as well, and it has to be mentioned, I am stunned, absolutely stunned that Morgan Gibbs-White is not in that squad tonight. I can't believe, how can you be at a club, captain, I think is a captain or something, but of a club like Nottingham Forest who are sitting third in the Premier League in the season they've had, and not be good enough to get. I mean, he didn't even pick him initially. Then a few dropouts happened. Then he brings him in, and now he's out of the squad. I find that baffling. He deserves his place in there. Rashford's done well, but Rashford's only just started playing well. Morgan Gibbs-White's done it all season.
Just on that, guys, the way this whole Morgan Gibbs-White thing's been handled has been quite poor, hasn't it? Really, you usually look at the mission and then bringing him in late. And
I just kind of wanted to jump on what Connor was saying now in terms of like an England stance. So look, what I wanted to say was, look, I think the vast majority of England fans will love the inclusion of Dan Burn not because of how he's made it to where he is now, but because he's been picked for this squad based on he's performing well for Newcastle this season. He's having a great season for him, in the league. I know they've had a few dodgy spells, but they've really picked up in the league. They've obviously just won, the League Cup. He played a pivotal role in that. This England fans, they love seeing guys picked who are performing well for their clubs domestically. So tying back to what I was just saying is I do think Tuchel's got to be very careful in that if he is going to pick guys who aren't playing well domestically, they're not, playing regularly, or if they are playing regularly, they're not performing well, but he's still picking them in the England squad before people like Gibbs-White. You've got to be very careful, because as soon as they don't start performing and results, the performances start to dip, and there's a maybe start dropping points in a few games, then the England fans will jump straight on his back, because they are very much. I know you were talking more about a style, etc. But as a fan base, this was one of the problems Gareth Southgate had. All the way through his time in charge, is that he had certain guys that he picked every time, regardless of not only how well they were playing for their club, but even if they weren't playing particularly well with an England top on, he'd still consistently keep picking them. I'm just hoping that he doesn't fall into the same trap, in that he has these favourites, he picks them, regardless every time the international fixtures come round, because you look at that squad, the likes of Reece James, who's hardly been playing for Chelsea. I'm not quite sure. People are saying, well, the only reason he's got in the squad is because obviously Tuchel managed Chelsea in the past, so they know each other. And then Jordan Henderson. Like, look, I can kind of more get my head around the Jordan Henderson inclusion, because he's been talking about a bit more experience, and he was saying that it's always been quite a young squad, and he'd like to bring a few more players in with a bit more experience, more leadership quality. Not necessarily going to play, but wants to integrate that into the squad. He thinks it's vital and so on. But still, Jordan Henderson's got in there ahead of guys who are performing much better in the Premier League. Not in the Dutch top division. So I just think he's just got to be careful. That's all. Like, if we're performing well and we're winning games well, and it's entertaining football, then he'll be absolutely fine. There won't be any problems. But as soon as things maybe aren't going to plan, a few dodgy performances, like I said, drop points in a few games, he will get the finger pointed at him, and it will be, why are you picking these guys who aren't doing it, domestically? They're not even playing domestically, ahead of Morgan Gibbs-White, for example, who I agree with Connor 100%. He should have been in that squad, even as just filler on the bench, ahead of someone like Eze, who, again, I'm a big fan of, but he has not been consistent enough for Crystal Palace this season. Crystal Palace are doing a Crystal Palace, they're mid-table, they're where they always are. Nottingham Forest are having an unbelievable season, and Morgan Gibbs-White is the one who's kind of spearheading it. He's their captain. Travesty that he hasn't been included. And then, like you said, Rob, it just, Cole Palmer got injured, and they brought him in to replace the injured Cole Palmer. And then, why is he not included tonight? I don't know if you guys have seen anything. Has he picked up a knock or something? But why isn't he on the bench? I thought
he had to leave 3 out.
He had to leave 3 out.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? You're right. You're absolutely spot on. I don't think it's been dealt with very, very well at all. And this ties into the point I'm making. He has got to be very careful how he deals with the squad. And I know, there'll be people out there saying, well, he's the manager, he picks the squad, who he thinks best. Yeah, right. Yeah, you've got a point there, but we're talking about fans and the power, the fan base has, and the English media as well. We all know how
cutthroat they can be.
Cutthroat, that's the perfect word, mate. I was thinking, dangerous, and you're right, how cutthroat they can be. You've got to be able to navigate that. You've got to be able to play that as well, because I think that was one thing Gareth Southgate didn't necessarily do very well, was know how to play the media and deal with that side of things. So,
listen, lads, they're now singing the national anthem, so I won't keep you too much longer. Connor, just quickly, if you can, a name that hasn't been mentioned, Phil Foden. Is he fortunate starting, not done it at the Euros, doesn't seem to be doing it at club level. There's been a real drop-off from him. When you look at somebody like Morgan Rogers on the bench, who's been electric this season, a breath of fresh air to watch.
100%. You know, again, these are, again, because of the team they're playing, but I also think somebody like Foden's almost a safe selection for Tuchel because he can go, well, you know, he's been in amongst the squad and he's done it in the past. But I agree with you. I think Foden hasn't had his most electric season all round. You know, it's not been great for him at City this year. International-wise, he's not really turned up all that often in the last few international breaks. So I think he can consider himself very lucky because if I'm Thomas Tuchel and I'm in there, I'm starting Morgan Rogers because the man's in absolute imperious form. I think very, 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 very briefly with Tuchel, he's in there for a short time. You know, he's there for 18 months and then he's gone. We know that. And so he's got a job there, a responsibility to make some kind of impact in that time and leave something for, let's be honest, probably Eddie Howe to come in and work with and build on bigger and better. And if he's, you know, overlooking guys at their peak performances right now, that could cause issues further down the line. So that's something he's got to consider.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Connor, but you're spot on. And this is the thing we're not talking about. I've seen this being floated about the last week or so. You know, after the squad was announced and in the lead up to this game, is that, well, Tuchel, you know, he's not thinking about the future because he's got this short-term contract. He's thinking about the World Cup. He's thinking about winning the World Cup. So, you know, that's what's at the forefront of his mind when he's picking his squad and he's picking his team. It's absolute nonsense. Like you just said, Morgan Rogers and Gibbs White have been two of the best players in the Premier League this season. So you're telling me they couldn't slot into this team tonight, you know, ahead of Rashford and Foden and, you know, put in a performance against Albania. Like you said, it ain't going to be a rollover. Albania are a tricky little team to play against. But, you know, those two have been doing it week in, week out against, you know, the best teams in the Premier League. Their two teams are up there. So this is tying into what I'm saying. He has got to be careful. You know, if we put in, I'll tell you now, like tonight, right? Even if we win, say, you know, by a 1-goal margin, and we don't put in a particularly good performance, the pelters will start being thrown at him straight away over his squad selection, his team selection. I guarantee it.
I think we just need to start saying, Robert, that he's Morganist. Do you know what I mean? He just doesn't like people called Morgan. I think that's the problem.
We'll end on that caveat. I enjoyed that. Listen, we'll come back and we'll chew through Sunday night at Hampden and obviously tonight's game and look ahead to Latvia as well. You think Morgan Rogers got a chance against Latvia, surely. Thanks for joining us, Tom, as always. Connor, pleasure to have you back. We'll see you on the other side. Enjoy the football tonight and over the weekend.